The
Okay, yeah,
co-host.
there we
Thank
go.
you.
Okay. All right, so I did excuse me, 3A. So that was the switching the order to basically have encouraging
So
increasing
this
public
last
participation.
section, this last line, this last phrase will now be first. Using social media is to
Right.
further
So
the goal.
that's the first part. And then secondly was in C1, where it says may develop a style guide for the board and committees. And
You see that, Susan?
See,
On the C1, second line, right at the introduction, not in the bullets. Second word is, it says the
So
board. right?
3C1.
There you go.
oh, 3C1. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so you're right on top of it. No, back up,
Back up.
where it
Back
says
up a little
C
more.
branding. So you're on
Go
E,
back.
go back to D and now to C.
Yeah.
That's where I was. Yeah.
Yep.
Stop. So the
Oh,
second
okay.
line for the board.
The
Just-
chair in consultation with the executive
Right.
committee.
Oh, style. I see what you're saying. Yes, style guide for the board and committees.
And I think here you might want to add in the chair in consultation with the district manager and executive committee. I think since the office is in charge of everything, the consultation should always include the district manager.
So who should go first, the DM or the EC?
It doesn't really matter.
Well, it should be the DM to see if it's possible. And then the executive committee to affirm,
Okay.
since the office, well, it doesn't really matter, but the office ultimately, the burden is.
Yeah, definitely the office, because
Yeah.
I know exec committee members often have great ideas, but they can't be implemented.
Yeah.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
So in consultation with the district manager, and the executive committee may develop a style guide for the board and committees.
Okay.
And then for going down to D, which is the next part, posting original content. So the focus of the board's social media accounts should be that the purpose of intent, but taking that last sentence and putting that in there, the focus of the board's social media accounts should be going back to encouraging increasing public participation in the board's meeting and activities through the posting of original content. So just, again, not losing sight of the direction of that. I just say that because that's if you don't have that part in there, it's not obvious. And I see, sorry, I had to flip the page. So it's actually, it has the purpose of use at the end, but that should be first. It's just
Or should it say original content of the community board?
Well, it's us. Original
yeah.
content by definition is us.
Right.
Is that defined anywhere else?
It
I
can't
don't-
mean anything else.
Yeah.
Because if it's our account, the only original content is what
Is
we
ours.
put on it by definition.
Okay, that's clear.
And then again in section D3,
Okay.
the second sentence, all requests are to be forwarded to the chair, who in consultation with the district manager shall approve or reject the request for a post. Ultimately, the office is in charge, so.
I thought it was the other way around, to the district manager with the approval of the chair. Did I misunderstand that?
Oh, it could be that. I mean, I was just trying to make sure the office was included in this language.
I think it
Because
should.
the office runs the social media.
So I think it should say district manager first with the approval of the chair.
That actually may make more sense.
Sure. Yeah. And it actually, that's consistent with the second part.
Right.
That's, yeah.
Which, which considering the limited nature of how we're using it really makes sense. I mean, DM will understand what is and isn't appropriate, and
And they can also screen it for appropriateness to begin with. And then in E for reposting, again, putting the purpose of use first. And then the educational nature second.
mhm. Got it.
And then number 2, again, in E, it's actually E3. It doesn't look like the renumbering got
Oh,
picked up.
renumbering, yeah, okay,
Oh, yeah.
got it.
In E3, it should be only items approved by the chair in consultation with the district manager. And it may be there that you want to change that the
Right.
chair or district manager shall attempt to respond to requests.
Mhm. Got it.
And then in F2, I don't know how to add this in, but what about members of the board are more likely to be aware of unofficial accounts than the board office. So just, should endeavor to just let the office know. But,
F2.
that was just more of an observation. And then under H, should add in consultation with the district manager and executive committee.
Yeah. Can you go over F2 again, please? The comment there.
Yeah, it was just sort of, it says that it's where it says it's the responsibility of the board staff to identify any unofficial accounts that purport to be official board accounts and take to take promptly any appropriate steps to shut down such accounts. It doesn't mention anywhere any obligation of board members who are aware of any accounts to notify the office. I don't think the board staff is going to be out looking for stuff.
If,
So is
Or-
it really the right thing to say it's the responsibility of the board
it
staff?
doesn't.
Well,
really, does it?
now that I'm reading it, it could be read maybe that it's the responsibility of them to say it's not an official account. Maybe that's what should be more clear,
The responsibility of the board staff.
It's
is
the-
to say whether it's official or not.
Right.
I don't,
it's
I
really
was
their
reading this, that
responsibility
they
to
went
take
out to go
action.
look for it. But maybe I was reading it wrong, and maybe it is in fact, they're the ones who say it's not an official account. So and anyway, that was
It's really more their responsibility to take action.
Right.
Once the identification has been made, and that really, if board members do have a responsibility to inform, to notify the office, notify the staff. If they suspect if they question,
I just reading this though, in looking at it should just be more clear that the decision maker is the board staff, whether it's official or not, right? It's not a mystery that, there's some account. It's either the office, it's either the boards or it's not. And the people who know that are the staff or the district manager. And maybe that was my just misreading the intent there. And I know that was created a long time ago. And then the other little thought.
I'd like to
Oh.
say something about this.
Oh, go,
Sorry,
sure.
Carter. I mean, it is a little confusing. I mean, is the board staff, one way to read it is that they should be going on, Facebook every day and determining, I don't think that's what you're talking about, that's not what we mean to say, but it could be interpreted that way. Board staff to evaluate, and I think evaluate rather than identify. Identify has a sense of someone sitting all day and looking for it.
Yeah, that's
Evaluate it.
better.
And
It's a
and it
little
also
bit-
might just say the district manager, because I'm not so sure
Yeah.
the staff is empowered to
Okay.
do that. I misread it, but that's good because now I think it's more clear as to what the purpose of that.
Yeah.
Or should it say to evaluate reports of unauthorized accounts?
Well, it either it is or it isn't. I mean, we're not going to have more than one account.
But we may not be aware of it and our office staff may not be aware of it. So
That's impossible, Michael. That
Yeah,
the board staff's not aware of it because it's
Right.
their job to be in charge of it.
okay.
Yeah, Katie?
I'm putting my hand down.
Oh.
That was the leftover.
No, definitely, it's clearer, it's not their job to go looking for unofficial accounts. It's to handle anything that's brought to their attention.
Well, should we say that? Should we say that? We want to make it clear that it's not their job, that they're not going to be searching every single day.
I don't think we need to say that. That was the misreading of it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just their job, look, that's the final decision maker. It's not even a decision. It's the final arbiter of
Right.
it. Either it is or it isn't. It's because everything's supposed to be under the control of the office. So if they don't know about it, it's not ours. And
Right. No, what we do have to add, though, is mention that it is that board members are expected to notify if they suspect that there is an unofficial account out there, that they should just provide notice to the office.
Agree.
That was what the point I was making, but I wasn't sure where that goes.
I'll work it in there. That's where, it'll be in there. I made a note about it. That's why I'm making notes, because I don't want to have to, I like to think about it before I write it. But, yes, that, look, board members should be our eyes and ears. All we're asking for is to, make the office aware. If they suspect something, they don't have to do anything. That's the office's job. And, yeah. Okay.
and then just the use of name and likeness, the intent here is great. If somebody snaps a picture of a board meeting and then says, oh, here's the board and here's so-and-so, it can very easily be construed differently. I know that's not the intent. I'm just giving an example, though, of how that could, get kind of changed around. And but I guess they're not trying to do it. So
No, they're not trying to do it.
yeah,
They're not trying to do, right.
Right.
those are my
Screenshots.
comments.
I'm sorry, Katie, did you say something?
I'm just thinking, someone takes a screenshot of Zoom,
Right.
someone else, a third party. I mean, the board member.
Right. Look, this is only people can only, you can only ask them to influence what they have influence over.
But you can totally tweet out something that's a screenshot from a public meeting, because
Right.
that's part of the public record.
Yeah, it wasn't us sending it out. It's somebody taking that picture and using it and
Right.
then making it seem like a caption of somebody's name is, or video is more.
Well, we have no control over that. I mean,
No, right. Well, that's.
I don't think it's fair to ask people who find out that their image has been used without their knowledge and then try to track it down and, do things. It's like, You're responsible for the things that you have control over, and that's it.
Yeah, it's more about video making comments, particularly on Zoom, of somebody taking that and then just saying, oh, CB2 said this, and then have a board member saying something, but the board member wasn't engaged, or it's not, they didn't do it. So
Yeah. You really actually get into all kinds of, I think we start to get into trouble because we're trying to control people that we have no right to ask things of. And that becomes, it's a prior restraint, and it poses its own problems. So, I mean,
Well,
look,
there's
this
some
is this is definitely something. Look, you take these comments, you put it together. It doesn't mean this is the very final version. It's something now that you've put focus on it. You sit with it, you ruminate over it, and if there's something tweaking, you can tweak that. That's great. I just don't want. I strongly resist the idea of trying to. You have to remember who these are for and what is the scope of our ability to, in terms of an ask of our members.
There's a show called Couples Therapy. Do you know this?
I've
show?
heard of it, but I avoid those things like the plague.
Well, it turns out that one night, Peter and I were going to a political fundraiser for Brad Hoylman at that townhouse that the guy who owns Murray's has on 10th Street, 9th Street. I think David was at that fundraiser. We were filmed on the street, and our little snippet appears in the beginning of Couples Therapy. And people, and just to Carter's point, people, email us or text us and say, "Oh, you were," and they assume we are in therapy, and we say, "No, we were caught."
That's a whole other story, because now you were used in a commercial film, and they didn't get a consent. They didn't ask you for a consent.
No, and it's not required. It's not required. We looked into it.
Okay.
But anyway, it's just, I think that's what Carter's meaning. It has nothing,
Right.
Nothing to do with us, but it's up there, and people make assumptions about, our participating in that show, or having this therapeutic relationship with the star, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, look,
So I think it's good to talk about these things. I think Carter,
it is really good. It's just, as I said, it's just, what is fair to ask? What can we actually, we have, always recognizing the limits of what we're asking. So, but like I said, if someone wants, thinks that there's more to be, just think about it for a while.
Okay.
I mean, because this is, look, it's also something that if there was something you wanted to add, I can add a line or two. I can circulate it to everyone. It's, it's not like we're not having a meeting. It's like, it doesn't mean we can't comment to one another and, make additional, little changes. Yeah, Carter.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much complete. The question is, have we just created a framework for all the areas in the core document that so it wouldn't have to be changed dramatically to incorporate anything else? And I think it does. I just raising that as the question, since we have public statements, use of name and likeness, social media policies, technical management, branding, posting original content, and reposting. I mean, I think that hits limitations on use, crisis management, and final authority. I think it hits all the areas. The only thing which I had mentioned to you, Susan, was that, and I don't know where it would fit in here, but if anybody is going to promote our meetings, who's a board member, that they repost a board post, not that they originate the post, so that you repost the board post, so it always goes back to the content derived from the office, and that removes a lot of confusion. And the control over the original post is still from the office. So
Well, how
for
would
example,
somebody- how
I'll
would
give you an
somebody do
example. So
that?
for example, let's say a meeting changed or something that the office deleted a tweet or something like that. It's the primary source is controlled by the office. Is why that kind of stuff is important.
But how would someone send, I mean, unless they sent it out on a personal account, you're saying that they would send it out on a personal account and talk about it instead of simply, yeah.
Yeah. So
Let's
just,
give
we
you
have a
an
lot of
example.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this gets back to how the office is going to operationalize this. Because in the past, there only was like one office staffer who could post something on social media. And if the timing didn't, I mean, so I've seen people like post it and then, and then somebody from CB2, retweets it or reposts it. I think now that we're going to have this more operationalized, there's going to be somebody in the office who can post something. So, I mean, that's really the key. I mean, we basically didn't, Josh had 35 hours a week that he worked, and if he needed to post something, sometimes it was faster to do it yourself than to ask him to post it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fair. I could put something like that into. But to go back to what you were saying first, Carter, about, does this cover everything? 2 points. One, you never know until you start using it and then you find, and life shows you where the holes are. And 2, this is also why we really want all of our board members to take a good look at this, because their respective experiences, we're just a small set of people working on this, and we have a lot more input if they actually give it a good read. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
I was just putting the question just back to the committee. Is everybody step back, looked at the section topics, and did we cover everything? That since we've been spent a while on this,
right.
it's more of just the pull away. Do we cover all the topical areas so that the future framework is just working within the framework, because that makes it much easier than having to come back and restructure stuff. It's
Right.
easy to do on the fly because this was set up so it can easily be changed. So we just want to go in with the good structure on it. And, for that was more my points, because it's less disruptive to have this as frameworked, right? So it's just easy to tweak as we go along.
Right. No, that's true. That's true. Yes, Michael.
So assuming the board approves this version, what level of change or tweaking would require going back to the board for additional approval to make more changes? I think we're complete here, but there may be something we missed. If the board approves this and something comes up in the future, do we have to go back to the board again to amend this, or can we tweak it ourselves?
Well, this would be something that you'd have a motion and somebody would, it would be, there would be either a reso that makes a recommendation of the following changes, or if somebody from the floor wanted to bring this up as new business and said, I would like to make the following change, and that's how you would do it.
So it's more likely to come as a motion from the floor, because I believe you want to disband this bylaws committee after the adoption of this version. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, once this is passed, I really think we can, this working group can go on hiatus. I mean, it's, especially if, we do have a good framework, the kinds of changes would be minimal. I mean, even if, look, and it doesn't mean that as a group, we can't we can get together on an ad hoc basis and simply address these things. It's not like
What
it
about my
disappeared.
sense of longing, Susan? What about my sense of longing?
Matt, if you're here to satisfy that need, I can give you a few phone numbers, but it's not, I don't think we can help you. Uh, yeah, Katie.
I'm going to reassure Matt, this is maybe the third or fourth time I've been on the bylaws working group, subcommittee, whatever it is. Rest assured, Matt, once you've been roped into this, you'll be roped back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got our tentacles in you.
Yeah.
So Susan, the communications policy, isn't that referred to in the bylaws?
It is.
Right, so whatever is in the bylaws with respect to amending it, and I don't have that right in front of me, and I don't think it's up on the current version isn't up on the board website, but that lays out, I think, right, how we might amend it, because it should probably originate in the executive committee, whatever is raised.
Right.
Just to make it easy, so it starts at exec and then goes to that full board, right? It doesn't have to take longer than that, but that's
Right.
and then secondly, and again, the two outside things from the bylaws are also the code of conduct, right? So that was the other issue which precipitated the entire looking at the bylaws originated from that, was to address that issue. So those were the two outstanding issues after we amended the bylaws, were some variation of a code of conduct and the communications policies. And I think the bylaws refer to both of those.
They do.
I'm looking
You are
at
correct.
my
Yeah, Matt.
notebook.
I was just going to say there are two ways of thinking about bylaw, procedural vehicles. So one of the vehicles would be bylaws, one of the vehicles would be standing rules, another, I don't know, I think those would largely be the two. And the third being Robert's rules. There's, the second, way of thinking about it is you just create a category. So if you say, hey, here's this thing, and then in the bylaws amendment section, we create a specific way of amending that document, you've resulted in the same thing with, very specific instructions on however you want it to do it. Just a macro thought.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Matt, because then it's just clear a whole list, you want to create, just make sure it's thought through. I mean, that's not to challenge anybody, but it's, some of these things are a little procedural, and so it's okay to bring them up and then frame it so it's ready for the meeting, not just on the fly. How are you going to write it? What is it? So there's a little advanced stuff.
Okay.
But without the bylaws in front of me, I don't know what it says. So that was, what do we say
Trying to
about it?
find it.
God, I don't know where I've got my,
Oh, it's in membership.
yeah, I think that the
Right
policies,
at the top.
they're referred to, but there's not really, there's no real detail on them.
No, members, well, yeah. Well, this is language that we started with at one point. Number one, membership, section D. Members is expected to be familiar with and follow CB2's policies regarding the making of public statements, communications with the press, and the use of social media, communications policies, as they may be revised from time to time.
Good.
So we just, I think that may be where we left it, but I can.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So
And-
we said that communication policy might be revised from time to time.
Oh, wait a minute, I can't open this.
So just to Matt's point, we might want to put in I have a version of the bylaws. I don't know which one it is,
I
but
know
I have a
what- I
version
know.
of it in front of me. with section 11.2, which is amendment, or no, excuse me, section 11, which is amendments. I think
That
that's
only-
where Matt is talking about if we put in a section of amendments of
Other, you mean, you
communication
want to,
and, yeah, or whatever, yeah, you can make it broad. Amendment of policies, right? Which might be, that's the place to put it in. And then we would have to put that out as part of this.
okay, now you're
That's
you're
the
actually making
amendment.
this more complicated, because now because normally those kinds of sections refer to an amendment of the document that you're in that case, the bylaws. Now you're saying you want to use that to also to set a procedure for the amendment of the policies and other things, which I thought we had.
I'll
we
let
broke
Matt
out
speak,
to-
but I was just taking his idea of where it would go. I mean, I'll put it
Matt,
back
what,
to
instead
Matt,
of
so.
Matt, what do you have to say?
I think, and Carter, correct me if I'm wrong, I think kind of what is somewhat underpinning Carter's comment, and certainly would be a comment of mine, which is that we don't specifically say what these are. And so they kind of live in this nebulous land of like not really being a thing. They aren't one of those vehicles. They aren't a bylaw. They aren't a state, because we don't name them as such. And so I think I personally would name it as a, I don't know, if we're going to create what I'll call bespoke rules, so like creating an amendment section in the bylaws, I think we would want to name these policies, by name and say, these are the policies subject to this provision. If we're going to create standing rules, then they just live under the standing rules house. But I think we got to say that they live there, would be my macro comment. And then everything else, then the rules associated with, if we don't create bespoke ones, then the rules associated with amendments or, force and effect are well known because they're known Robert's Rules vehicles.
Right.
So are you saying we should do an amendment to the bylaws stating that?
That's
It
what
would-
you'd have to do.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, if that's if that is, how are you? If that is if we do want clarity on it, you know what I mean? If we do want to change it, I think it would be good. It's not a hill I'm dying on, but.
Yeah, just to Matt's point, just to be clear, how do you change these? That's all. And where do you put it? Because I think these things are generally revisited in the heat of the moment. And so just having clarity of how you change it, because we want to change something because we had an example of something. It's good to have it
Well,
clear
Okay.
how you do
why-
it, because just to what we raised before, somebody could make a motion under new business just to change something without any thought, without any discussion, without any laying out anything.
Okay, here's the idea then. Why don't we include in this document a procedure, instead of going back to the bylaws and playing with them, we can add a section that talks about amending it, and then we state that, and then it clearly applies to this document. And
Susan,
then
that's done frequently, a separate
it's
section.
a very,
that says-
it's a very
Right.
standard, it's a
Right.
very standard type of a thing, and it gives you that kind of comfort, but we don't have to then go play with the bylaws.
Yeah, and we could do it as a separate section that would say amending these principles.
It would, yeah, you would put it at the end and it would be called amendments, just the way we have a section in the bylaws. Final, there would be an I and we would call it amendments.
Right.
And then the things that you're concerned about would be addressed, but it's clear that instead of having to go back and forth, it would be here.
I like that.
Yes, that works.
Matt, how do you feel?
And the procedure is that it has to originate in, I'm just trying to get exactly what the difference is between our proposed amendment here, the amendment procedure here and the amendment procedure normally. And the difference would be that for this, it has to originate in exec.
I don't know. I mean, that's the question. Now we're discussing, what we want, but normally when you have an operational document, you usually have, I mean, it's not to say that you couldn't borrow it from the bylaws, but normally you'd have a provision in here that would identify as amendments, and then it's clear that it applies to this.
But
Now, considering that we wanted to pull this out of the bylaws, it kind of,
But
works
is it just a
against-
resolution that needs to be, like, you can amend a resolution that you could, so is it, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but is it that we pass this and then at some time in the future, we want to pass a new one, and so we just pass almost identical resolution with the included changes, and, one of the whereas is, or one of the therefore be it resolves is, this takes this takes the place of the old one.
yeah, why not?
I'm not opposed to that. I'm
Yeah, no,
just
I
asking.
think that's
Yeah.
exactly what you would do.
So then I don't even think we need, then all we need is a resolution of enacting? No, I don't really like that, but, making this the policy.
I guess the only thing that you might also want is in the sense that it's not something that can be brought up on the spur of the moment, that it's something that if somebody is planning to do it, that there has to be a certain amount of notice before a meeting, there has to be, the proposal has to be circulated, because these are not, unless, if it's not coming out of, I mean, especially if it's not coming out of a committee, it's coming out of, from an individual.
I would argue the only place you can do that is the bylaws, because any standing rule can be overruled by a simple majority. And so even if you have a standing rule that says you have to have notification of XYZ topic, a simple majority could overrule that rule, and then you could just put it forward on the spot.
But I'm confused now. Would this require, as Matt said a few minutes ago, to be introduced by the executive committee, or could it be introduced on the floor of a board meeting and voted and adopted there?
I'll say I have no programmatic feelings. I'll let others, and then just procedural that I care about.
I have no preference. I'm just asking the question.
It's not something that I've actually given, yeah, Carter, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I was just looked just briefly back now that my email is back up, now that it has completed its indexing of stuff. So the whole origin of this was to look at rules of order and or a code of conduct. Then we went into changing some of the bylaws. And the two things that we specifically addressed were social media policies and the rules of order or code of conduct that would exist outside of the bylaws. And because of their importance, I agree with Matt, they need to be specifically referenced in the bylaws because they are a higher order of, whatever the board does, because they address the whole board. They're not committee, procedures or policies or whatever they are, and they were intended to be pulled out so they could be more readily be amended, but then we don't talk about that. And that was the intent of where this came from. So and then just as far as changes, there should be an option for whether it's at a, and this isn't to complicate it. This is just to have the two procedures. A regular board member should be able to introduce a change to anything. So there should be a procedure for that, or there should be a procedure for the executive committee to change it. But it's of question whether a regular board member could bring something up at the executive committee to introduce this. So I just saying that those are the two things, but we always want a voice for everybody, but we just don't want it done on the fly, as Matt was saying, of a simple majority changing the rules. So it's just, the vehicles are, how does a regular board member, how does a member of the executive committee change it? How do you just originate it before the meeting so everybody can see the proposed change before the full board meeting?
So how would a member who is not a member of the executive committee introduce it?
Well,
To bring
that's
it-
my point. It's just, it can be
You
whatever
only
we
introduce it
deem,
as new business. You would have to introduce it as
New business, right?
but new business where?
At a full board meeting.
Right, and so then it's introduced for the next full board meeting?
Introduce,
Well,
introduce.
that's what you would do. That's the way, I guess, to protect it. If somebody brings it up as new business, then you would say that any proposed changes would be voted on at the subsequent
Right.
meeting.
And would that be also discussed at the executive committee or not? I'm just, these are just the little,
It can be, I mean, the executive committee could bring it up. I mean, that's possible, but even if the executive committee, proposes a change, then a resolution that comes out of that committee would still have to be presented to the board.
okay, I'm just supporting what Matt's saying. I mean, I think it's just better to think it out now. And so it's clear.
So then this is gonna require writing, then I will have to take a shot at writing all this up now. Because then we're not finished.
When you say we're not finished, do you mean we will be reviewing?
Well,
what
based on
was-
what we're having this conversation, there's got to be another section in here that discusses amending this. I've
So
got to
would
write
we-
that up now.
Would we meet again to discuss it, or would you ask us to approve?
Michael
it?
obviously doesn't feel the same kind of longing that I do to see all
Right.
of you.
Well,
That's the
let me
truth.
put it
It's
this
just
way.
trying to prolong this, I know.
I really just want to know from Susan how she plans to handle it, because we keep feeling that we're at the point we were ready to present it, and then we keep adding additional things. So
Well, I
I'm
mean,
really just
that's,
questioning.
that is the nature of the meetings. I thought that, I was aware of the comments that Carter had started the meeting with. And I felt, they weren't the kind of things, they were more about tightening and wordsmithing. And I thought, I can turn this around. It'll go out to the board, beginning of next week, and then they would have time, and then it would just get voted on. But now I've got to write up enough, and that you folks have to look at it too. I can't just send it out without you. I mean, it's a committee has to okay it.
I have no problem with that, so long as I understand where we're going.
But that also then then if I can't get to it, we're not gonna vote on it, maybe. David, we have not heard from.
Oh,
Mr.
I've been carefully listening to every word from this erudite group. I have never been a fan of somebody in the full board on the new business saying that they want to change the bylaws and then voting on it at the next session. Just take a look at what we're doing here. We've been doing this for what, 6 months, 8 months? I've lost count already. I mean, and we're steeped into this. We look at every word, we go back and go forth, and somehow introducing something and then voting on it at the next full board seems to me to be slipshod. Seems to me it's not vetted enough. I think we're almost there. I think somebody suggested that it needs to go back to exec session or vetting, or even more than that. I tend to look at these bylaws a little bit like our Constitution, and they shouldn't be too easy to change, and they shouldn't be too easy to amend. Amendable they are from anybody in the community board can make a suggestion to amend it, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion, too easy to do. That's all.
So therefore, David, are you recommending that it definitely go to the executive committee and not directly to a vote at the next board meeting?
Minimally.
Minimally.
Well, look, even if it goes to the executive committee, it still has to go to the board.
Of course, at the end of the day, it has to go to the board. There's no question about it. But to go to somebody introducing something in May in new business and we vote on it in June, I'm not ready for that.
So it's a two-step process.
I don't know if we really have the authority to stop somebody because you have the right, first of all, this is not the bylaw. These stand apart from the bylaws.
Yeah,
But
I
the
understand.
bylaws do have a path to amendment where an individual can make can present a motion.
I'm okay with that.
So you're saying that this is being held to a higher standard?
No, I need to know that there's more vetting going on. I mean, take a look, step back from what we're doing. I mean, we really put a lot of our brain power into, getting this just right. And I think that new business, and then next month we vote on it, is not vetted enough. That's all.
I think David is saying that at least it would be a two-step process and not a one-step process.
Well, minimally.
But what
two-step
about-
process.
I'm sorry, I have my video off, but what about if we say that in order to amend, it has to go through the bylaws committee,
Which we should be able, I agree, we
We
should
can
be
do
able
that,
to.
we can do that too. If someone wants, if an individual member wants to, they make a motion, and then the motion is sent to their proposal is then sent to the working group, and the working group would then meet specifically to address,
Reconvene, we reconvene.
specifically to address that.
I'm okay with
yes. I think that's been our process, and it works. Not quickly, but it works.
Okay.
And then we could put a time limit on how long the reconvene bylaws committee has. They can't stretch it out for 6 months. And maybe they get back, if it's in May, June, maybe they get back for the July full board. I'm not looking to hold it up or obfuscate it or to kill it in committee, so to speak. But I am not happy about not having it properly vetted. That's all. And look what we're doing. Just look at this,
But,
Yeah.
but now what the result of that would be either what happens? Does the working group then does it recommend that the changes be approved?
No, let them recommend and let the full board vote.
And then it's really just being sent back for a vetting, for an
That's right.
evaluation.
And at the end of the day, the full board will vote whether, the suggestion as it stands is to be voted on, or the person who made the suggestion wants to modify it. But that's I'm okay with that.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that?
And that would avoid.
I'm not,
having
that's
to
why I
do-
have my hand up.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
This is
I'm
procedurally. That's a little, we're going back to treat the communications policies as if it were a bylaw. The whole point of this was to make it easy to change. There's nothing in here that is that dramatic. The point is that it's thought out before it's voted on.
I agree.
And that it's written clearly so everybody knows and has an opportunity to review it in advance. I don't think we need to reconvene any new committees to discuss a change in it. But the pathway of an individual, if that's at new business, and they propose whatever it is that they'd like to change, whatever it is in writing on this, that it be presented to the executive committee for a discussion point. It doesn't mean that it's changed. If this person, whoever is suggesting the change, wants to accept modifications through that discussion, then that's brought to the full board. We are talking about, who's in charge of posting on social media. We don't need to reconvene a committee to make small amendments to that, or on, the framework of branding or technical management. I mean, these are not things that rise to the cause. The point is just that it's not done on the fly under new business, that there's a chance to look at it, discuss it, bring up some points in advance so people can come back to a meeting with any of those thoughts. I mean,
Okay.
I just don't think we're going to be substantively changing, the policy on public statements in such a massive format that requires convening anybody. It would just be tweaking. It's just, you need a chance for people to look at it beforehand. So I just
Okay, we got it. But let me say something, you're the one, Carter, of all of us who looks at every word and vets every word. And then on one hand, you say, this is really important. I know you want to get it straight before it's submitted. And then you say, well, there's nothing here that rises to the occasion of something monumental, but, this committee, you are making it monumental, by looking at every single nuance and possibility. And I'm surprised that you would say that it doesn't require any of the vetting except a discussion point at exec and then voted on. Sorry, it seems that it's a contradictory to me. So you may not.
Sorry, I mean, it
Obviously, you don't
actually
feel that way.
flows in the whole framework of why we did it this way. If you go back to it, which you were part of those discussions
Yes,
on the committee, we pulled it specifically out of bylaws so that it can be amended more quickly. The point is that it's also something that should be frameworked in whatever that change is so that people can look at it outside the meeting. And David, that sounds a little bit personal, but can you give me an example of what you think would
no,
rise?
it's not personal at all. No,
Change?
it's not personal at all.
Well, no,
Guys,
but
guys, please.
but can you just give an example of a type of change to the communications policies that would require it returning to committee?
Oh, if I thought about it, I would, but I can't think about it on the fly.
You know what? I like to say something.
Please do.
Actually, communications policies have changed enormously, not in the last year or two. Well, it's sometimes in the last 3 years with Zoom. And we're still in the middle of this enormous telecommunications revolution. And, what I know, Carter, that we're trying to make it easy, but then I'm thinking, artificial intelligence is coming. We didn't even know about Zoom 4 years ago. Even though we want to be agile, this is actually an area that may not be able to be agile in, because there's been such profound change. So I'm just, I'm being a little philosophical, and I don't think it's bad. I mean, Matt said, what's the process for changing this? And he thought we should be overt, saying what the process to changing this is. And that's sort of where we started. So
I mean, there's just a lot of fear of the unknown here. I mean, we used to have it that everything that was posted on Facebook was auto posted on Twitter. That's the whole purpose. If you go back to the purpose of use of what this is to get word of what the board does out, and doing that streamlined as much as we can. AI would be a great tool to assist in that.
Okay.
But that's not inconsistent with the communications policy. None of those things are inconsistent, and that's sort of my point.
But let's stick, if we are talking about specifically about having specific provisions on an amendment process. Michael, go ahead, please.
All right, so I'm confused. I think I'm hearing that we want, and I may be wrong, David says we might want a 3-step process where it's introduced perhaps in the new business. It is referred to the bylaws committee, which is then approved by the executive committee, and then it goes to the full board. I think I'm hearing David say he wants a 3-step process. Am I correct, David?
No, I just wanted some more vetting, if I feel.
So what would the appropriate vetting be? I'm getting a little bit lost.
Well, I think that they introduce it. I think the committee looks at it for a session, and we report back to the full board. If it's introduced at the end of May, we look at it the first week in June, send it back, and let it and to the executive session and let them have a shot at it, and then we could vote on it in May. But I just don't feel that I'd like something to sail through without other people, and people who like experiencing this. Other people like not having a crack at vetting it and putting it into the context of what we work so hard for. And one other thing, I didn't think that we pulled out these only to make it easier to amend. I thought that we had decided that they didn't belong in the bylaws, that they were sort of ancillary. I think someone earlier in the discussion said they ought to be referenced in the bylaws, but, and so that people could see what we've done. You know, it's like the Federalist Papers. Let's see our thinking on things. And I think that that's why we pulled it out. I never thought that we pulled it out because it was made it easier to amend. I never thought that was our motivating factor.
Well, it was pulled out. It is not something that normally goes into a bylaws. And
Yeah.
it's also something we wanted people to be able to access more readily and to
Yes.
see, you know, and to speak because of its nature, not to be buried in the bylaws.
Yes, I agree.
Matt, go ahead.
I don't think we necessarily need to be overt about the making changes to it, but it is binary. It's either a simple, we're comfortable with a simple majority being able to change this at any meeting, or two, we change the bylaws. Those are kind of
Well, we are bound, actually, we do not have the right to create supermajorities.
right.
So so it's always.
It's only
any
notification.
changes will always, yes. So really what we can do is, in the sense that if an individual wants to make a change, what we can do is require that it can't be voted on at the same meeting that it's brought up, to give everyone time to, evaluate it. So.
But that has to be in the bylaws. Or you can pass a resolution with a simple majority saying that that reso is no longer in effect.
I see what you're saying. Yes, you can.
And then it's no longer.
Supersede a reso with another reso. So you would have to, you're right. You would have to make that a provision in the bylaws if you wanted to do that. So then the question becomes, if we set, and I don't think we have a right to stop any member from saying, I want to bring, I want to, as part of new business, to say, I want to make changes to this. We don't have that right.
Of course not.
So we
And
would
that's,
have to
Susan,
change the
why you have the
bylaws to
two,
make that right.
and that's why you just have the two pathways, right? Which is an individual suggesting a change,
Right,
or the executive committee suggesting a change.
right.
But the point is that any changes are presented prior to the meeting to the full board through some method, whether that could be a report from the executive committee, which is a normal, we don't normally turn that around that fast, but it's that everybody has the language in front of them before it's voted on, so that they can contemplate the discussion that David is talking about and talking about it at that meeting.
The trouble
don't-
with that is that you're talking about when we have an exec committee meeting that's 2 days before a full board meeting. How much time do people really have to think about this?
That's a great point. The point, Susan, is that it's all written out for somebody prior to the meeting because it's been raised. And if you want to extend that, so it's a month from the exec, so it's at the next full board meeting, that's fine. The point is that it's very clear to people what the change is and that there's notice on it so they can raise whatever issues. It's not to overly, go
Yeah.
crazy in depth. It's just so it's not put on somebody and they don't know what's happening. Right. And
Well, yeah, but
that's
notice is only notice if it's meaningful, and by meaningful, I mean that you've had time to really consider it. And if if somebody is going to bring something up as new business and ask for it to be voted on, the only way to give them, unless you, as Matt pointed out, change the bylaws to require it be voted on at the following month, it would then require someone else to then make a motion to delay the vote, or, hold it over to the following month's meeting.
Well, that's why we wanted to, and to go just back to the beginning of the conversation, that's what Matt was saying, that needs to be in the bylaws.
So you really are
Because-
talking about opening up the bylaws, which is why.
Well, I don't think it's as complicated as it's made out to be. I think that it's a few sentences on the procedures of how to modify the policies. You can lay out that procedure to be whatever you want it to be. It just has to be clear. in the bylaws. And I think that's the point that Matt was making in the beginning. And it can be any policy, but in order to delay it in such a way that people have an opportunity to review it, it has to be put in as a in the bylaws in that fashion. It can be whatever we want it to be. But if it's not a simple majority and there's some procedural element around it, then it just
It
needs to
has to
be
be a simple
outlined
majority.
in the,
That's a given.
yeah, then it just needs to be outlined, whatever it is. The point I was saying before, so there's two ways, right? And maybe both ways are started under new business, and that's just how it is. And that the new business, that it's properly, now with you could even put that if it's going to be discussed at the executive committee, that's required to be posted a week in advance, so that everybody knows what's being discussed, of whoever the presenter is, whether that be the executive committee or an individual, that it's posted 7 days in advance so people can just see whatever it is that's going to be discussed at the exec meeting. Or it doesn't have to be discussed at exec, it just has to be circulated at some particular time period before the full board so that people have notice. But the question is, where would you have discussion on it? In that, I think, is David's point, is he wants some discussion of it. I don't think we should have the power of saying no to moving it forward, but just discussion, and maybe there's further comments on it. But ultimately, if somebody brings it up, is there an intervening step before it's voted on?
Well, the only way to have meaningful discussion is if this is raised at a meeting, is that the actions of the board at the meeting at which this changes are proposed, is that there will be discussion, but no vote. The vote occurs the following month. But that is, and that's fine, as long as it says so in the bylaw, because otherwise it's something that you could change. Somebody could make a motion to say, no, I want this voted on now. There's a majority that supports that, and that's what you're going to get. So that is all I'm saying, is that this kind of step has got to be actually in the bylaws. And that's, if that's what people want. I mean, I personally, I am like, kind of, I just don't see this kind of change, occurring. And I don't think that, but I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
I think, I didn't hear what your personal opinion was fully say.
I guess I am just thinking, these are, yes, they're policies, and yes, they are I just don't envision people. I mean, I don't know what kind of changes you're even imagining would happen that would be so detrimental that we have to then go back. We have to create this special,
Well, I mean, Carter brought up a point earlier, which I agreed with. A lot of this stuff is done in the heat of the moment. We've had a situation like that in the last couple of years, and in the heat of the moment, people are agitated, angry. They say, okay, it's my right to do this at new business. I'm pissed off, and it hasn't really been thought out. And these things are often in the heat of the moment, because somebody feels that one of these items was used against them, and I think that it's like a cooling off period for me. And so I think that if we waited another month, or like you said, I don't think the world's going to come to an end if we wait another month. And it could be a simple thing that is not in the heat of the moment. It could be, a minor correction, and maybe we could deal with it. But I don't think our community board is going to falter because we take an extra month to look at something and wash out something that really is like an angry change as opposed to a thoughtful change.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, as long as, then I will I will go back and if this is what.
I mean, people may not agree with that, and that's why we have these
consensus is that
discussions.
we want to have that, then laying out this, either this is, whether this is a reso that comes from the executive committee or it comes from an individual member through new business, is that we can simply set it up that, whatever's presented will be voted on at the following month. And that, and that's it. That's all. I think that's all we really need is that period in which people will have a real chance to think about it.
That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, Matt. Oh, your hands
No,
down.
if that's the consensus, I was going to say I'm not sure we need all of this, but I don't. Either way, I'm fine with it. I just think a simple majority is going to win. I mean, everybody knows this, but they're going to win it. This just delays it a little bit, gives people time to think. If that's important to everybody, then I'm fine with that.
Well, what it does do is it gives people time to talk to one another. And to, it's all of the thinking that goes on in the background. When people are put on the spot in the moment, what they think may be appealing may not be once somebody has presented, well, what about this situation or that situation? So these are important. The idea of putting in a change that simply protects that is, it's not unreasonable. If that's what people are comfortable with, that's fine.
And
Yeah.
Susan, I just wanted to say one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
It's consistent with everything we do. It's, when do we raise something at full board and vote on it immediately? Everything goes through a committee process, and people have, the committee has weighed in on it. Fellow board members could go to that committee if they're not on that committee, and then you get the report beforehand, and hopefully you've been reading that. You've read what the other committees have done. So a little pause. Is it just the way we do it?
It is, and it's. I think it's particularly, it's just, and that even when somebody brings something, except new business, but if something comes up, if with the bylaws change, to use that as an example, is that even if somebody brings something up in new business, in promoting a bylaws change, that doesn't automatically get voted on. There is a procedure in there, so that it does get so that those changes get evaluated before there's a vote. So that's what I guess, that's, I think, what's the goal. We're trying to mirror that. Carter?
That's how I would feel comfortable.
I think, all the things everybody's saying is true, but if this policy is passed, it already exists and the language already exists, right? And so the amendments to it would be as if, you're just trying to slow down. Oh, I want to go back and change a few words or a sentence or whatever it is. And the point is that you want it clear beforehand so people can see it. And as you pointed out, contemplate it, not overly contemplate it, just that everybody's able to see what it is. And the idea is, and just to Matt's point, is that there's not really a place here for that to happen because you're amending something that already exists. It's not introducing something new per se. So it sort of exists in this weird spot. And if we could do it by consensus, that's how we will go forward, is that anybody who wants to change this, that they just give 10 days notice in the language. That also covers it too. But the thing is, you just want to know about it in advance so people can discuss it.
That's
And-
I mean,
And
that's
come,
fine
and
too.
so the problem is I'm not aware of that being able to do that. Right. So it's just having a process by which you amend it, which goes back to the original points of what Matt was bringing up, and that
Yeah, but the reason I would tell you that something like 10 days may not be enough, because what happens when somebody does this in the summer? When their people aren't around, that, you know, it's that kind of a thing. So that if we're going to put in a delay to allow for it, there's got to be enough so that really people, based on the reality of our lives and when this might happen, have a chance to actually consider it. And of course, we don't know what kind of changes we're talking about. We're talking about, it could be anything from technical language to a whole new section. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just bring up, you know, you're right. We should just put it into what is de facto the way the board works, which is just the monthly cycle, skipping August, but just refer to the next full board meeting, right? You know, that
Right.
resolves it, going back to it's introduced at one meeting, the full language is introduced, people have a chance to contemplate it, and then it's voted on at the following meeting. And the two ways that change can be introduced that I would think are from an individual or the executive committee. In
Right.
either way, you just go to the following month
Right.
with whatever the language is. The language that's being presented to be voted on is available 30, whatever, the full period.
No less
8
than 30
meetings.
days. It would be, yeah.
The question then becomes, though, is that when it comes up, can somebody amend that language at that meeting? Because there's been notice, right? And if somebody gives an amendment and it's voted on by a simple majority, but the notice of changing it is what's important, right? And the contemplated change. I just throw this out because we had this arise when we were changing the bylaws, right? We had this very situation, but it was all good because everybody had the opportunity to look things over, know exactly what was happening, to discuss it, and we did it all in the overt, proper way, and it wasn't just thrown on anybody. That all we want to do is to make sure that there's opportunity for people to know it, discuss it, think about it, and bring it up, even if it's not gonna, you don't want to have to go 3 months to change something because people keep tweaking the language.
Right. Well, I think what we're talking about here, when we're talking about notice, is not, I mean, yes, I would say that if something's being presented, if the actual, you know, proposed language, somebody can't make a motion saying, I want to include this idea in it. They would have to actually present specific language. But to follow the procedure that's used for everything, including the bylaws, is that, yes, then you make amendments to change the language. But there still has been notice, because everybody knows what we're talking about and everybody's had a chance to think about it. It doesn't mean that they think about every possible variation or alteration. That's never the case. Yes, Michael.
So I'm going to ask my question from earlier. Where is this process memorialized? Is it an amendment? Is this in the procedures or is this in the bylaws? I got a little bit lost as we're coming to an agreement where we're going to place this.
It would have to be in the bylaws in order to make sure that it's not, otherwise, as Matt pointed out, all it would require is a simple resolution to override these, you know, to override it. If we want to actually have something where we always require, you know, a vote at the following month, that would be a bylaws thing. I don't think it's much, because if I go back to that amendment section, I think I can put in language that makes, you know, that anticipates other kinds of, you know, policy documents. And if I do it that way, then there would be minimal change, except that instead of it going back to it wouldn't go back to the bylaws, where, you know, but that would be my goal, basically.
Okay, I think that would work for me. I'm not sure how the others feel about it.
Yes, David.
Hi, well, I'm listening to the discussion and I think that we ought to make some way to deal with things that are minor. You know, if someone has a minor modification, you know, a word or two or a sentence that doesn't change the essence of something, but they see something that they don't like, and something that really changes some of these items that we have here, and maybe it's for the executive session, the executive committee to move it on to the full board. Once they look at it and they could put it on, if it's brought up in the May new business and it's looked at quickly, even though it's only a couple of days before the full board by the exec, and we put it on to the June full board. But if in the wisdom of the executive committee, they feel that more discussion is needed or that it's a more complex issue, they could extend it. And if it's not, they could put it on to the next month. I think that's a good compromise.
Well, it's tempting to want to say, oh, there's only a few little words in here and want to, just tweak them and, and it's not of a substantive nature. But then we start to get into the situation of evaluating the content and it's like every time we do this, we're complicating the process that much more. So either.
Would the executive committee have the ability to not bring it to the full board if they felt it was not a wise recommendation?
No, I don't
Well, they
think.
don't have an obligation. I mean, nobody has an obligation. What do you mean in the sense of the executive committee is not a conduit for an individual. It's either somebody on the executive committee says, I think this, and then it's debated and then they vote on it.
So if the executive committee says it's not a good idea, would it make it to the full board?
Yeah,
No.
I think so.
No, the committee, I mean, it didn't come out of committee. Nothing came out of committee.
Nothing can say it against this. Nothing came out of.
But nothing, it's not like an application that has to then go forward. I don't, it's just that it's something that's simply not going to move forward.
So
So
therefore, the executive committee could kill it if it feels that it's not appropriate.
Yes, and then if somebody thought it was appropriate, they could introduce it as an individual under new business.
Okay.
Yes, Matt?
You finished my thought. I was just going to say, like, nonetheless, somebody could still produce a resume.
That's
that says this is-
absolutely
yeah.
right. They could, it's not like it's just that it would not have the support of the committee. But they would
Okay.
always have that right, and then they would introduce it, and they would introduce their specific text, and then it would then be discussed, and then for a vote the following month,
I'm okay with
or
that.
the following board meeting, whatever that happens to be.
Or following full board.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
And if we're all okay with this, I mean, can we do this if we're all okay with the language? Do we need to meet again on that? I'm just saying.
I don't
Because
know.
it's
I don't
fairly
think we do.
straightforward. It's just what we discussed mostly was the procedural part, not and so if we vote on the spirit of this and then it's written in such a way, right? Then we just go
I'm
forward.
comfortable not forcing you folks, as much as I enjoy your company, to actually have a meeting, and we can, because what we know what we want. You just have to see it in writing.
Yeah.
But it has to be presented at the same time that these communications policies are, because you can't put this into effect without having that second part.
Okay.
I'm just trying to just get it so that this is all understood, agreed upon, and move forward without having to. And if there's no dissent in what you put forward in writing, that it's all can move forward, because I think we've exhausted every corner of this.
Well, I thought so too until this evening.
Well,
You keep surprising us.
well, Matt is the one who brought it up. Don't point to me, which was a
Okay,
very good
don't
point,
point
is
to
how
me.
do you amend it?
I'm fine with a simple majority.
Well,
What you said sounded good. Why don't you write it up and let's just move on.
okay, that's what I will do, is I will work on it. I will try to utilize to the extent possible what's already in the bylaws that will make it for a minimal, change to recognize that we want that process, that that there is that time for evaluation. And then we will present those changes along with this. And of course, once we have that in place, in the future, if there's created like standing rules, then it won't be a problem because the standing rules would be covered by that as well.
I'm
So,
in agreement. I'm in agreement with what we've outlined today.
We-
is everyone, you know,
Susan, rules shouldn't, I'm sorry, rules probably shouldn't have that because then you can't suspend rules.
hmm,
That's why I'm suggesting it should be carved out by name would be my suggestion, but again, not.
got it. Okay, well, you know, even if we just mention specifically these policies, I mean, it's, what, I don't know, let's take it one step at a time. Let me get something down on paper and see what it looks like, and before we, you know, and okay, is there anything else then, everyone? I know you'll just have to wait for my surprise. Are we good? Is everybody, we're all on board with the same plan?
Agreed.
And I will do my best to turn this around as quickly as possible. And we'll just take it from there. But yes, I agree that if you're all comfortable with what I produced, then we don't have to actually have a meeting. We just need to have an okay from all of you. You've already voted. It's, you know, we've already voted. It's just a question of, it's like, you know, it's like, I don't know, SLA resos. You know, we vote on them and then we actually produce the formal writing. Okay. So if is there anything else? Otherwise,
Thank you, Susan, for your patience.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Susan, you've done a yeoman's job here, no question.
it is, you know, so it's like, yes, it's like, you know, I've actually learned that it's like, you know, getting asked the question, what is your greatest strength? And now I know it's patience.
So,
So,
thank you,
okay,
Susan, for
you're
leading
very
this
welcome.
committee, and as you're going off to the bigger and better committee leadership
Now
role,
I
whatever.
have just more committees to worry about. Okay,
The
guys,
expression
I
is,
am,
you ain't seen nothing yet.
ain't seen nothing. Oh, yeah. Okay, guys, thank you, folks. I
night.
do appreciate it, and you'll be hearing from me.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
No.
See you.
Yeah.